Good afternoon. Welcome back to Law and Crime. I'm Michael Bryant. We are bringing you the latest out of Tennessee. This is the murder trial against mother Robin Howington. She stands accused of fatally shooting her 5-year-old daughter, Destiny Oliver. We've heard some of the prosecution. We've heard some horrible facts for the defense. Let's listen down to some closing arguments from the defense. How are they going to get out of this? Let's watch.
Good to see you again. And to Callie. When they spoke with Mr. Oliver and spoke with Callie, they corroborated the story of what happened on the 12th. Some differences in whether or not who the instigator was. He's at her house. He's angry at Callie. Angry that Callie's there. She asked him to leave. He won't leave. It's the same man who lost her 16-year-old child at the time because he put her in the hospital, and father ran and got emergency relief and got custody of her child while she was out of consciousness in the hospital due to a beating administered by Mr. Oliver. She told him that. And this case can tell you, now, they didn't force her to say anything about Antoine Oliver. They didn't make her say that. I'm going to tell you, as far as I'm concerned, 10 minutes and 30 seconds into that interview ended. You can't take a woman who's got PTSD, who's just watched her child be killed in her house in front of her by her other child, jump up and down, yell and scream and cuss at her and tell her she's got no heart, she's got no soul, and then say, let's continue. You think that might have triggered her? Like she needed any more triggering? You think did Robin Howington need for either Mr. Wardlaw or Mr. Riddle to tell her, your daughter's dead? She was well aware of that fact. And I will give Mr. Riddle credit. When he took that stand and I asked him, now, if it was an officer involved shooting, the officer would be given time to review his records, his reports, maybe video. He kind of hemmed and hawed with me for a minute, and he said, okay. Yeah, policy on and off has been 48 to 72 hours to reconcile the facts. This is a trained police officer. A trained law enforcement officer would get 48 hours to 72 hours. He didn't mention anything about an immediate brief statement, like Mr. Wardlaw did. He said 48 to 72 hours to reconcile the facts in their head. This woman, who is suffering from PTSD, who has been at Chuck E. Cheese and then out to the friend's house, and then to the park, and then comes home to feed her children, and then suffers the worst tragedy she has ever suffered, that her son gets hold of the gun and shoots her daughter. She gets questioned immediately at the house. They don't let her go to the hospital where her daughter is. They take her to the hospital an hour after the shooting, about 10:06. The doctor declares her daughter dead, comes into the room and tells her that. 40 or so minutes later, she's in an interview room at KPD. Not 48 hours, 40 minutes later. State just loves those clips. I'm going to show you those clips. They can play all the video that exists in the world, and that's not going to convert this from a family tragedy to a murder. It's not. But one thing that is interesting is when you look, if you look at those clips at any other time, notice the time on them. 12:45, 1:45. They're back at her house with her at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. She has been with them for a work day on the worst night of her life. And they want to say, well, then she said this, it wasn't true, and this, it wasn't true. So see, that means she's guilty. Not that she's confused. In fact, not that Ms. McDermott stood up there and said, let me show you this other video that happened the next day. It was 2 days later. Did she lie to you? No, she was confused. Can you imagine she was confused in a courtroom where she works, in a job that is her profession, to deal with questions and answers and facts. Ms. Howington was being interviewed on the worst day of her life about the worst possible circumstances. And she needs to get everything right. And if we talk about why those officers might need 48 or 72 hours, think about some of the things Ms. Howington told them. They talked about in that 17th story that she was telling them that on the night of the killing, that Antoine gets the gun and he takes the thing out of it. He's trying to take the thing out of it. That's what she told them happened on the 12th, and what they verified happened on the 12th. He took the gun away from her. She pulls the gun. He takes the gun away. She pulls the gun and says, leave. He won't leave. He snatches the gun from her. She doesn't shoot him. She didn't even have her finger on the trigger, because if it did, when he snatched the gun, it would have fired. She's got the gun in her hand trying to make him leave. He won't do it. He takes it, breaks it apart, throws it down, and Callie went and got it. So Oliver said that, and Callie said that. And the officer testified. Mr. Riddle did, and he questioned them, and yes, that's what they said about what happened on the 12th. So Callie's the last person with a gun. She tells you, I told him, put it away. Now, she's just been in this confrontation with Mr. Oliver. He's taken the gun away from her and thrown it. Callie's gone to pick it up. Do you really think she wants to deal with the gun again? She says, put it away. It's 2 days before the shooting. The state would have been asked, ma'am, why didn't you go in there the next day and check and see where that gun was? So for 2 whole days, you hadn't looked to see where your gun is? How often do you go look and see where your gun is? She tells him it's in the closet on the shelf because that's where I keep it. She tells him Gavin had to climb up there on the stool because Gavin got the gun. And remember, that's what we're charged with, that Gavin got the gun. And that Ms. Howington allowed that to happen, and that's negligence, and it resulted in a death. So they're giving you that Gavin got the gun. She's in this room in her mental state that she possesses at that moment. As one of you described, how could a mother be in her right mind under those circumstances? She is under those circumstances, and she's trying to figure out how the hell did Gavin get the gun? Well, he must have got on the stool. He must have got to the closet, because that's where the gun is, because that's where she keeps it. The truth of the matter, as she told you yesterday, was after Callie, she asked him to put it away. She never told Callie where she kept the gun. He didn't know where she kept the gun. He went and put it away, wherever away is at that point. So when they ask her where was the gun, she tells them where she keeps it.
So an interesting case here on a number of fronts with the defendant. She took the stand, so it kind of locks her into a lot of the facts as the defense portrays them. And then they have the police interview that, of course, should never have happened. If you're a defense attorney, that shouldn't happen. But Philip Hamilton is here, Catherine Lizardo. Philip, what concerns me is, as you're doing your closing argument, as counsel is here, you're kind of locked into your client took the stand. So it's not like you can throw out a number of theories and hope that you muddle the minds of the jurors. They're going to have to focus on and believe what your client told them.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes you're just stuck between a rock and a hard place. And there are those cases, and I think this is one. Clearly, I think, Michael, if she doesn't take the stand in this case, even though she has no constitutional burden to do so, the prosecution has to prove the case. I think if she doesn't take the case, it's just guilty outright. I'm serious. Just like with the evidence that we have, with the elements of the charges, and just with the jury's lay perspective on life, they need to hear from that mom. So she had to take the stand, right? And so it's a case where, yes, he's locked in, but it's a dance that he knew he was going to have to do. And I think he practiced. He's getting through it as well as he can. He's certainly not the highest level dancer, but she has made it difficult for him, I think, to not have tricky feet. It's a tough case.
Yeah, and by the way, he sounds like J.K. Simmons to me. So if you don't know who that is, the guy who won the Oscar for Whiplash, every time I hear that voice, I'm thinking J.K. Simmons. Anyway, Catherine, so the big argument he has, and by the way, you can see the deliberation clock has started. So as we're looking at some of the closing arguments, the jury has the case. Catherine, his big argument, the defense's big argument was for the police interview. They just snapped her up, took her in there 40 minutes after, her child is killed by her other child. Do you believe that that stress of that scenario explains maybe what she said during that interview?
At first blush, it seems a good argument, right? Because yes, you're in trauma. She has a history of PTSD. All of this are chaotic in her mind. The problem with that argument is that the interviews happen different times. She had 4 different interviews, 4 different stories. And those interviews, most of them happened over the 48 to 72 hours that he was stressing that even a trained police officer would need to understand the fact. So how do you address that? That it's been over 72 hours and she's still consistently changing the fact. The only consistent thing she was doing was changing her story. But everything else is a lie. That is the major issue about that. After 72 hours, should she have had the mental capacity to manage her PTSD? Only an expert would know, but that is a big hole in his argument there, I believe.
Yeah, that whole interrogation was just bizarre. There's the whole PTSD, and I was raped by a cop. She gets hugged by the guy investigating. The whole thing was bizarre. Okay, again, the jury has the case, pushing a whole 10 minutes here, and based on so many facts seemingly stacked against the defendant, might not take long. We will see. When we come back, more of the defense closing argument for whatever good it did. This jury, again, has the case. We'll be right back.